What in the heck happened against Penn State? We're going to do our rewind on that. Plus, how important is momentum going into March? How much does the Big Ten tournament matter? We have a great guest today to break it all down.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. As always, really do appreciate you tuning in. Today's episode, we are talking the Penn State game. This is the rewind. What happened in that game? What is going on? Does Max Klesmit fix it? And how important is the Big Ten tournament? All that and more. We got Coach Gauthier coming on, as always, super humbled and appreciative of the time, getting somebody who does this for a living to be able to kind of talk about some of this stuff and break it down for us. Coach, I'll start here, man. We were talking a little bit, texting in part, like what happened in the Penn State game? How do you lose that game?
Yeah, Ryan, it's great to be with you. Yesterday, to be honest with you, I was flat out shocked to see what happened. They jumped out to the 40 to 27 point lead. Then they have problems finishing the half, which I'm sure we'll get into. I know you and I have talked about it before. It's been a problem with this team. And then it's almost like Penn State was playing loose and free, and they got confidence. And the Badgers, I don't know if they shut it off and weren't able to turn it back on, but, you and I were talking a little bit before the show here. That second half wasn't really competitive, to be honest with you. And it's just really disappointing, to lose a home game to Penn State, who frankly isn't a very good basketball team. But then, on top of that, with all that was on the line for Wisconsin yesterday, to get a double bye, senior day, being at home, closing out the season on a high note and ride that into it, waiting until Friday to start the Big Ten tournament. It's just a shock, to be honest with you, just a shocking result.
What do you think was the bigger issue, offense or defense? Because I did my reaction show, and I just felt like the defense, the perimeter defense, was really problematic. The transition defense was problematic. And then I thought at times they left Gilmore a little too much on an island in the post. I felt this was more of a defensive issue than an offensive one to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I tend to skew defensively too. We've talked about it, and my thing with this team has always been the defensive limitations is what's going to lower the ceiling, in my opinion, on this team and how far they can go in the NCAA tournament. And, yesterday was another example of that. Now, I would say on the offensive side of things, what has been kind of trending the past, since the last 6 minutes of the Oregon game, notwithstanding the Washington game, is offensively, the ball is sticking a little more than it has been. I don't think the player movement's been as good, with that. And I think they're forcing a lot of shots. Obviously, they've shot a lot of threes all year, but I just don't think they're doing a really good job attacking the rim, attacking the basket. They're settling for jumpers. You could see Tanjay the past couple of games has settled for some jumpers. So I think offensively has been an issue, but I think it always goes back to defensively. And I thought, talking in the reaction show, you and Rajiv yesterday, and you bringing it up now, I think the perimeter defense is really lacking right now. We've talked about it all season, just the lack of urgency on the ball to get over screens, keep the ball out of the paint, keep the ball in front of you, not allowing straight line drives. But what was really troubling yesterday is, I think you brought it up, the lack of urgency. I think the announcers even brought it, the lack of urgency on closeouts, getting out the shooters specifically. And then to your point, I think they relied on Klesmit. Now they are on Gilmore a little bit more in the post yesterday, but I think they had to because of winter. But they kind of put them on an island and lets, a perimeter, an interior guy who isn't that gifted offensively and hasn't had a big year, really kind of dominating in the interior. And, that's kind of been a theme. Badgers struggle with athletic, bouncy type of bigs. And, yesterday was another example of that.
I was curious with this, and you've been in locker rooms when this is a veteran team. We've talked about all year, right? You have Tanjay's a veteran, Crowell, obviously Gilmore, McGee. These dudes have played a lot of ball. They've been in a lot of games. When you have a letdown moment like this, and obviously is an impossible question to ask, but is that more on the veteran players or more on the coaching staff? Is it the coach's job to get the players up for games like this, or is the veterans' job to shake out and say, "No, we gotta play better at home with this much on the line"?
It's a great question, and it's easy. And the majority of people and stuff blame the coaching staff, which is, the go-to. And, I tend to agree on that. But in situations like this, especially like you said, when you have a veteran team and it's senior day and what they had on the line with the double bye and being the last Big Ten game and being at home, I'm sure the staff did everything they could and warned them, hey, Penn State has nothing to play for, this and that. At a certain point, coaches can only do so much. It's up to the players. And, not being in the locker room and, not being around the team, it's hard for me to say. But my tendency, just being in the game and being in locker rooms and being around players and coaching staff, I think the Badgers kind of thought yesterday was going to be easy. And, they got off to that great start, being up 40-27. They thought Penn State would kind of go away. They kind of just ride the seniors out, get to the double bye. They kind of shut the switch off. And, once that switch is shut off, it's really hard, almost impossible to turn it back on. And I think it's more on the players that, I just think they kind of got caught peeking ahead and got wrapped up. Senior days are always tricky anyway, because there's so many emotions. And you throw, what was on the line there and playing a team that you knew that was their last game and they weren't making the Big Ten tournament. And, everybody thought it was going to be an easy celebration day. So, I just think they weren't emotionally into the game from, a possession by possession standpoint, and got caught peeking ahead and got a little overconfident and, it bit them in the rear end.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point on the emotions of senior day. And I do put it more on players in moments like this. There's still good shots going up. Players just have to make them. I thought some of the turnovers were a little careless. I thought, listen, John Blackwell, John Tonje, they know how to close out to a shooter. They know how to do that. And it just wasn't consistent enough. Certainly everybody plays a part in wins and losses. But I do think as a veteran team, part of what you expect is for them to take care of some of the little details so you can focus as a coach on the bigger ones. And I want to ask about one of those kind of details. Penn State comes in, they shift the defense around a little bit. They go into zone, man. Wisconsin comes back, they get crowd the ball at the elbow in the middle. They put shooters in the corners. Philosophically, I don't hate that. It felt like we just weren't hitting shots. And I guess my bigger question is, if we just hit shots like we normally do, the defense is still there, but how much of this is just Wisconsin not hitting shots? And all year we've talked about this team has to shoot well.
I think that has a lot to do with it. You bring up a good point, but I guess my counter to that would be the whole point for teams, and Ryan, you've coached and stuff, the whole point of teams playing zone is A, they don't think they can guard you man-to-man. But B, what is the point of the zone? They want you to settle for jump shots. And if you look at the Badgers over the last 4 or 5 games, they're shooting 25% from the three-point line. They're taking, they had been shooting a little more than their average amount of threes per game. So it's not like they're doing anything differently, but they haven't been shooting well, for a 4 or 5 game sample size now. And I just, I thought the announcers did a really good job bringing it up on the telecast yesterday. There were gap in a zone. You're supposed to pinch and penetrate gaps and get a piece of the paint, kick out threes inside to out, or throwing in the post, kicking it out are always the best type of threes to shoot. And I just think a lot of those, were they open shots per se? Yes, but they weren't off a dribble penetration, punching a gap, or a paint touch. They were, 2 or 3 passes around the perimeter, shoot a three, which that's fine if you're making them. But at a certain point yesterday, especially in that second half when they weren't going down, would have loved to see Tonje and Blackwell and even Kamari kind of penetrate those gaps, get in the paint, get some stuff going to the rim first, get to the foul line, and then kick it out for threes. I just thought they played into what Penn State's coaching staff wanted them to do, is kind of just get them, focused on the perimeter and just passing around the perimeter and jacking threes. And I think Penn State did a good job of making. I think the Badgers fit to what Penn State was trying to do. And I think they settled for too many jumpers.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. There's very few moments in the game where, and you've seen it, where an offense puts a zone into a scramble, right? You pinch and they start scrambling, and then you 2-pass, 3-pass, 4-pass, and the zone is just discombobulated and shifted. There was very few moments where it felt like we really shifted their zone, which that's a good point. To your point, we were taking shots that Penn State had kind of hoped we would to some degree. We have to take a quick break here. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about Max Klesmit. How much of this does he fix, and how much of this doesn't he fix? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers with Coach. Always grateful to have him on the show for sure. Today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at Supply House. I've talked about it a couple times. The people that listen to the show are handy. This is a handy group of people that listen to the show at Supply House. You can get all your HVAC, electrical, plumbing supplies, over 400 top brands, 200,000 parts. I can't even count that high. You'll find exactly what you need delivered fast, quickly, coast to coast. And if you need help with an order, Supply House will help you talk to a person, like a real person, to help you through your order. Exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM. Start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5, and you get 5% off your first order over at supplyhouse.com. Today's episode also brought to you by our incredible friends. And I would be lost without these people over at Wayfair. Like, I don't know how to find comfortable stuff I like. Wayfair's got it all there. I've talked about it before. The couch behind me, let me adjust my camera so you can see it. I'm in the way. That is a Wayfair couch. I've slept on it, fallen asleep on it. I chill on it. My kids chill on it. You can get all the things for your house over at Wayfair. Find the perfect piece, whether it's tying the living room together or patio furniture, whatever it is. Head over to wayfair.com. Find something that's just your style today. You get incredible shipping, inventory, pricing, selection. It is amazing. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, let's jump back into this with Coach. And some of this swoon started, coincidentally or not, when Max Klesmit got hurt. And you and I have talked a ton about Klesmit, McGee, rotations. It feels like they've lost the bench punch without Klesmit out there, with McGee moving into the starting lineup. And it also feels like they've lost a little bit of their swagger. Am I crazy, or what do you think Max Klesmit fixes with this team right now?
I think you're spot on with it, and I'll be the first to admit, I apologize to Coach Gard and the staff and stuff, because I was on the bandwagon clamoring that you need to give Kamari some of Max's minutes, and yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong. I think what it's really done with Max being out of the lineup is it changes everybody's role, and it throws the rotation off. And I think it's more than changing the role. I think it shifts some guys. This happens a lot. It shifts some guys' mindsets, that Kamari steps in the starting lineup. So, I don't think he's purposely trying to do too much, but he's doing more than what we was doing before. And I know the staff is just saying, hey, just do what, you always tell guys, if somebody's out, next man up mentality or whatever. But the key with that you tell your guys and players all the time is, hey, you do you. We're not asking you to do more than what you've given us before. But I think mentally for players and stuff, that they're just, they're trying to step up, and they're trying to do a little too much than what they did before. And it just throws off the chemistry. So, while you're, going through the commercial here, I was just kind of looking at some stats, and you're talking, Max is playing 28.5 minutes a game, 10 points. He's got an over a 2-to-1 assists to turnover ratio. So, we're talking about how that ball's sticking a little bit, and the player movement, the ball movement is not as good. And, to be honest, he started every game that he's played in. I just think it threw off the rhythm, threw off the consistency. Now, bench guys, Janicki's playing more minutes, Kamari's playing more minutes. Max isn't out there. That's a lot of experience. It just kind of throws everything off, and you're backfilling 28 minutes, here and there. You can't sit Blackwell for a little extra minutes if need be. You can't sit Tanjay for normal minutes that you were before. I just think it throws off the equilibrium of everybody and what they're doing. And I think Max, he has his defensive limitations or whatever, but he's still, if you look at the Badgers as a whole, he's one of their better defenders. So now, now you're hurting yourself on the defense end too. So I just think it throws guys into roles that, they're not thinking that they're trying to do too much, but it happens. They are, and it's throwing everything off.
Yeah, and you kind of hit on this, but this is one of the questions we had for you. What is the mindset of a coach when somebody gets hurt? How do you balance the don't do too much, next man up with also, hey, we do have some shoes to fill here?
Yeah, you try to talk to the guys and say, hey, like I said earlier, you do you, just do what you're doing. And you just try to stress, and that's where, ball movement and just getting that ball movement, player movement where guys aren't forcing shots, telling guys to relax. But the problem is they haven't been shooting it well. You miss a couple shots early. Now Blackwell or Tanjay or whoever thinks, they got to press a little more and, pick up more of a burden. And, it's more mental than it is physical. You just try to convince guys, that to relax and don't do more than they've done before. But, it's the mental side of things, and it's just human nature that, I'm sure Kamari's trying to take a hold of the situation, trying to increase his minutes and just kind of, your heart and head's in the right place, but it just starts to snowball, and you try to do more, you try to do harder, and it just actually it snowballs into more of a negative. And it's really hard to balance that in, with guys, because like I said, it's not a coaching thing or a schematic thing. It's the mental side of things.
Let me ask you this too, because I think your point about changing up the roles is really, really good, because you look at the minutes now that Blackwell's playing, right? Blackwell had been in the low 30s. And since Klesmit has been out, it's been 36, 37, 35. Same with Tanjay's got an uptick. McGee's got an uptick. And I think our perimeter defense, our guys are sticking on screens. They're not getting around as easily. But that's a lot more difficult when now you're telling Blackwell, hey, not only do you need to play 37 minutes, you got to get around screens. You also have to be the initiator. You're taking all those dribble drives that Klesmit had. That's on you too now to some degree.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Ryan. And I think, what it really does to you say, because no matter who you are, players, when you play heavy minutes, they're going to rest at some point on the floor. The thing is that player going to rest offensively or defensively? So if you're looking at Tanjay and Blackwell, well, where are those guys going to try to catch their breath, catch a quick rest while on the floor? They're obviously going to do it on the defensive end because, the Badgers need them to score. They're offensive-minded guys. It's human nature. Players are going to rest one end or another. Those guys are offensive guys, so they're going to catch a little bit more rest. What they're going to do is try to sneak rest on the defensive end, so then that leads to more defensive issues. And I think you brought up a good point. I think as hard as Blackwell and Tanjay play, because they're at the top of the scouting report, so, you're getting the best defenders or rotating guys on you. Those guys are better and more effective when they play in the low 30s. You start playing them mid to upper 30s out of necessity. Those shots, your legs are more tired. You feel more pressure that they can rotate more defenders away from onto you because Klesmit and his 10 points and his passing ability aren't on the floor. It just makes everything more difficult. And I think, and those guys, because they play so hard and they're attacking the rim and getting bodied, and the Big Ten's physical and stuff, I know people don't think, well, what's the difference of playing 32 minutes to playing 37, 36 plus, but it's a big deal. Stealing a guy, if you think about it, if you're trying to steal somebody 4 or 5 minutes, what you do as a coaching staff is, the first dead ball under 17 minutes, you get your guy out. So that say it's at 16:50. So 16:50 until you get to the media at 16. It might only be 45 seconds of game time that they're not playing, but then you get the 2.5, 3 minute television timeout, media timeout. You do the same thing a little over the 12-minute mark. You do the same thing a little over the 8-minute mark, so forth, so on. So now you're stealing 2 or 3 extra minutes, but those guys are only missing 3, 4, 5 minutes of game time. And that's how you try to do it with your main guys, especially with the media. You have the media timeouts and stuff. But now, those guys, you're using the media timeouts to rest, and they're playing those extra 3, 4, 5 minutes. And, I think, especially at the end of the year when you're talking about playing in game 31, the wear and tear is real.
Yeah, and it allows you to stake your lineups differently, right? With Klesmit, he gives you a little more size. You can put him out there with Blackwell or Tanjay, where now you always need at least one or two of Blackwell and Tanjay out there, and it just makes it difficult because McGee's not as big. So for 30 minutes, you're trying to cover up with a smaller guard. I'm right there with you. I thought I apologize.
Yeah.
Listen, we never said like take Max's minutes away, but we did think, hey, some more minutes for McGee, some less for Klesmit, and I think Klesmit has been a huge part of this, and we probably underestimated that a little bit. All right, we do have to take one more quick break. We're going to come back, talk about the Big Ten tournament, the importance from coach's perspective of balancing rest versus success in the Big Ten tournament. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. Plus a couple of your questions. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel remains just an incredible partner to the Locked On Podcast Network. Obviously, March Madness coming up. NBA is going on. Right now, there is an incredible opportunity to have some fun, spice up your weekend. As I always say, do it responsibly. Always do it. But do everything responsibly. Everything you do should be done with a modicum of responsibility. Approach it like that. But check out FanDuel. Live betting, parlays, futures, teasers, spreads, quick payouts, great user support. The interface is phenomenal. It is easy and simple to use. And I love using their live betting feature so you can bet during the game to keep that game exciting, even if the game score is getting out of hand. Right now, over at FanDuel, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets back if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA, the Locked On Podcast Network. They are incredible. You will not regret it. All right, let's jump back into this, finish up this great conversation with Coach. As always, incredibly grateful for his time and his perspective. I think the big question here, and people are going back and forth, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. There probably isn't. But what's the balance between, hey, this team does need to rest. We talked about body blows, heavy minutes, get healthy, versus this team could use some success heading into March.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about it over, this week as the week was transpiring, especially after they got the win at Minnesota, and then Illinois helped them out Friday night. I texted you after the game on Friday and said, hey, the Badgers have a double. All they got to do is beat Penn State at home to get that double bye. And, like you said, to me, it changes the dynamics of the Big Ten tournament and the importance of it to me, coming both from a fan perspective, but a coaching staff perspective. Because what I thought in talking to you, I thought the big thing, what the double bye did was, for me and my coaching side of things, is like, great, they get the double bye, you're off Friday, you win that first game on Friday, so now you're in the semis. You're riding that momentum. You win that first one. I personally, if you lose the game on Saturday, that's actually to your benefit, because then you get home, you rest up, and you have an extra day and a half to prepare. Now what is it, Ryan? They've lost they're 2-3 in their last 5, I believe, something like that. So now the Big Ten takes a little bigger importance, I think, because now you got to play Thursday. So you definitely don't want to lose that game, because the one thing I hate about tournaments, and I've been on some successful teams going into the conference tournament, and if you lose early, I know the committee won't admit it, but say if the Badgers would lose that game on Thursday, they're going to drop another spot on the seeding line if they lose Thursday. And that's the frustrating part of it, because they say they take the body at work, but if you lose a game you shouldn't in the conference tournament for whatever reason, it seems to hold more water. Like if they win Thursday and they win Friday, I guarantee you they're not going to gain a seed.
Right.
And I would be even the only way maybe the Badgers would gain a seed was if they would win the Big Ten tournament. But, I'm under the belief, they could win, 2 games. Their seed's not going to change, but they lose Thursday. I think they drop another seeding. So my point with all this is that I think now the importance is the focus has got to be, you almost need to win just to get the good vibes back and start playing good basketball again. Because, 2-3 in their last 5, losing 2 games at home, is now you don't have as good a feeling, as that you're not playing at your best as what they're being forced. So that's why that Penn State thing, I just think it changes, just me personally, the whole dynamic of that Big Ten, because I think winning the Big Ten tournament, obviously as a coach and as a player, the opportunity to cut down nets and win a ring and all that, I mean, that trumps everything. And you want to be playing your best basketball. But, when you look at the Badgers and stuff, that, that you play an extra 40 minutes on a weekend, and the Big Ten is what the last or second to last game being played right before the tournament, and then you factor in travel, and God forbid you play on a Thursday and you're on the West Coast or you're on the East Coast, the travel and those days get condensed. And, as a staff and as a player, you don't even know who you're playing until, Sunday night, and so then you start crunching down film, and then you're traveling either Monday or Tuesday, depending on where you're going. It happens real fast. So, I've always been the belief the more rest, the better if you're playing good basketball. And that's, I think that's where yesterday kind of hurts, because now I wish I had a better answer for you, Ryan, but I feel like I'm straddling the fence here that, yeah, I would rather take the rest over than, getting to the championship game or winning it. But now, just given the fact how they're currently playing right now, you need them to get things back going and get some guys going here going into, Thursday or Friday in the NCAA tournament.
Well, no, I think you're straddling the fence a little bit, but I think you're doing it because to me, that is the right answer. You do need to get some rest, but you also do need to play some solid basketball going into the tournament. You need both of them. I do have a couple questions here from people. Zach said, and we might not be able to get to all these because I always want to be super respectful of your time, but Zach said, how do you rebound going into the tournament time when you're kind of, I don't want to say limping down the stretch, but you're not wrong. They've gone 2-3 in their last 5, couple losses at home. Is this a coaching thing where the coaches need to get the team back on the page, or is it a veteran leadership thing? How do you rebound this team?
I think what you try to do, whether you're playing really well or you're struggling a little bit like the Badgers are right now, I think as a staff, you try to lessen the mood. Like, you don't really want to talk the importance of it. You want to keep the guys right now at this point of the year, Ryan, you are who you are. So you want to keep practices short and sweet. But the most important thing I learned from Bob Sunbull at Missouri St. Louis, he's been in this business for 40 years, and they're in the GLVC conference championship game today again. What I learned from him, he always had our teams playing really well in March, and he would practice. We would script a practice no longer than 40, 45 minutes, but we could be 15, 20 minutes into practice. He would wait for something really positive to happen in practice, and he'd blow the whistle and call everybody in the center court, and he would end practice. And sometimes it was like 15, 20 minutes in, and I'm like, Coach, what the hell are we doing? We're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And he's like, gee, you want these guys wanting to be here, and you want them to feel like they're on top of the world. And, as I've gotten in my career and just seeing that, that's what you want. You want to keep the guys loose and fresh, because there's so much noise on the outside. There's so much pressure. Guys are looking at, Klesmit and Crowell, and these guys are looking, there's no tomorrow now. The next time they lose, their college careers are over. So there's enough, and people are putting pressure on them. You got you and I talking about like what's wrong with the Badgers, and there's enough pressure on them. So you want to try them as a staff to keep them loose and fresh, because you're not going to change who you are. You're not going to come up with any schemes or systematically or change your ball screen coverage. It's too late for that. So now you got to focus on, how do we get these guys feeling the best, feeling fresh, being loose, so we can get the best. And to answer the question here from Zach is, the best thing is you just hope, Max comes back and things just start clicking, and then they can just say, oh, we just weren't playing well because Max wasn't there. We got Max, and then they start playing well again, and they forget about what's going on in the last 5 games, and they can just chalk it up to, we didn't have Max in the lineup. And then, maybe they can, wash that bad taste out of their mouth and go from there. It's the crazy part is the players get less caught up into this stuff than fans and coaches. A lot of guys are just like, they're on to the next game. They're on it. Like, they don't really, the majority of the guys really don't overanalyze things. They really just go out and hoop. So you want to put them in the right mindset.
Well, this is from Mike. Do you see a lack of ability to finish games with this team down the stretch? Has that been a red flag for you? I know we've talked before halftime too. And again, in the Penn State game before the half, there was a 10-point lead that got whittled down to 5 with about a minute and a half left. Let's lump both those in there. Is that a situational thing that you've seen all year and something that gives you a little bit of pause with this team?
It does, and it's something you and I have talked about over the years, right? Is a lot of times, when the Badgers seem to have a lead late, they kind of go iso ball. You really saw it a lot with Chucky, where they would just kind of hold the possession until the last 5 seconds of the shot clock, and then Chucky would take a couple of dribbles and then shoot a step back three. And almost like they're trying to run the clock out. And, that's really hard to do in basketball. But then I thought they turned the corner. You and I talked about after the Purdue win, that Max was keeping it towards the end of the shot clock, but then he was dropping dimes. Different guys were scoring. That ball was whipping around. They weren't iso balling. But then you go to the Oregon game, and that's all you saw in the last 3 minutes. And I think they've kind of fallen back into that, where at the end of the games, they're almost playing not to lose instead of keeping their aggressiveness. And, Coach Gard talked about it. He talked about it after the Oregon game that he thought they lost their aggressiveness. And he talked about it in his press conference yesterday. But, so he's talking about it. But then when you see it on the floor, I kind of, I just kind of think they just kind of hold for iso ball, on the last, run the shot clock down as much as they can and hope a shot goes in. And, the majority of time, the past couple of years, that hasn't worked out really well for them.
Yeah, I think we've seen that in spurts this year. Not as much because of the changes they made, but absolutely last year with Chucky, which, by the way, I think gives Badger fans kind of this lasting impression of Chucky that he wouldn't fit in this offense, where I think in this offense, Chucky would be a master initiator with all the shooting around him. We'll never know, but that's just my thoughts.
No, I think you're right. And I think Chucky even – I don't know, Chucky brought it up or you brought it up the other day, is like Chucky, the part of the reason he said he wanted to go to Louisville was playing faster and offensive freedom now, and then he leaves and look what the Badgers are doing. They're playing exactly how, and look at the numbers Chucky's putting up. I mean, it's scary to think with this, this you and I have talked about. He's surround Chucky with the shooters that he has on this team. His numbers he's putting up is scary good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'd be great on this team. I think he'd be great on this team. We're going to wrap it there. He is Coach Gauthier as always, man. We really, really appreciate the perspective, the time. It makes all of us smarter, myself included. So it's awesome that you're here. When you're done checking out this show, if you're watching it, go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest news stories on the Big Ten channel over on that channel. We will talk to you later, as always, on Wisconsin, and we'll hit you up tomorrow.